Доброго дня усім, хто слухає нас онлайн і хто сьогодні завітав до зали. Розпочинаємо роботу в Українському кризовому медіа-центрі. Перша тема на сьогодні – обсяги фінансування енергоефективності у державному бюджеті 2018 року. Нашими гостями є Тетяна Бойко, Баур, заступник керівника енергетичної групи підтримки Європейської комісії. Першим
The lady represents, there were some technical glitches. She presented all the participants. Thank you very much to all of you who is today with us. And we would like to emphasize from the point of view of Ukrainian society that we need to address the problem of the allocation of
Хотів би одразу подякувати всім експертам і гостям, які доєдналися сьогодні до нас на цьому брифінгу, який є частиною програми, яка здійснюється за фінансової підтримки Європейської комісії з моніторингу і підтримки імплементації.
We wanted I want to start with analyzing the structural efforts, so to say, that take place, I would like to start with the law on the energy efficiency. It was adopted yet in June, on the 8th of June, and we believe that the current situation in which we do not even see any bills on the creation, the establishment of this fund seems very odd to us. So that's one area of our efforts as we see it. And as last week, literally, Vice Premier Mr. Zubko emphasized, his ministry's priority task is the adoption of a statute, and we would like to support the Ministry of Regional Policies in this respect. At the same time, we would I would like to point out that Ministry for Regional Policies works seriously, and we have recently seen a number of bills introduced to the Parliament, and they are now being discussed by the public at large. It's about the energy efficiency of the buildings. But again, let me emphasize that we do not see any documents on the establishment of the fund that I have already mentioned. The financing, the funding of these programs for energy efficiency is an issue in itself. Let me just refer you to one example by saying that 400 million that is planned, that are planned in this budget, are absolutely insufficient in our view. For example, we can take this new association of the owners of property, the so-called OSPB. It's a building with 422 apartments, and so they had this energy efficiency modernization project. So they allocated a substantial sum of money, 30 million hryvnias. The warm credits, the so-called warm credits, warm loans program only covered some percentage, some share of this. But suffice it to say that if only half of this program funding that is 200 million out of 400 million, are allocated for the energy efficiency and energy saving in the buildings, that would be something. Otherwise, I am not sure at all that this scale of investment can seriously change the situation with energy efficiency in our country. Let me now turn the floor over to the other colleagues who are going to describe to you the other areas of energy efficiency efforts in Ukraine. Dear colleagues, I would like to start by with saying that the programs of energy efficiency is one of the requests, one of the demands of the directives of the European Community, European Union, and as we hear it all the time from the government, it's also a priority for the government. But in practical terms, do we see that being really implemented by the government? Well, one of the indicators is the funding. As Denis has already mentioned, these newly established associations of the owners of private real estate should be considered the, so to say, the yardstick or even the foundation of these efforts. What we are talking about, is it enough to just replace the windows, to maybe improve the heating systems? It's not. If we limit ourselves to only these, it's not going to be the real energy efficiency as it should be, and we probably should first of all find the key, so to say, key part of this chain of energy efficiency efforts, and we are of the opinion that it's these associations of the owners of private apartments or privatized apartments or OSBB. We, as has already been mentioned, the special fund through which the serious money should have been channeled into these efforts has not yet been established. That is to say that the government has not complied with what it was saying by mentioning the foundation, the creation of this fund as one of its priorities. I'm not saying that if there is no fund, special fund for that financing, we should stop the program of energy efficiency in Ukraine. Not at all. But it's just about the effectiveness, the efficiency of our efforts. We know that, for example, there were a number of organizations who went to get some funding through the bank account, as they were indicated by the government, directed by the government. And when many of them started trying to get that money, they were told, many of them were told that the money was basically lacking. They ran out of money. We are aware of only 2 buildings that were successfully implemented those energy efficiency measures, but that is only laughable. Only 2 buildings for the whole country. That's I know that dozens of those OSBBs, so these associations of the owners of privatized apartments, they are going to continue their energy efficiency efforts, and the thing we need most is the money. We are aware of the buildings that have reached the energy efficiency and energy saving levels of 30, even 50, and on several occasions even 60% efficiency. That means that the utility users, utility services users themselves are saving money for themselves. It's beneficial for all the participating parties. But we cannot, regrettably, we cannot yet say that we can see in the national budget for the next year the proper reflection of the necessity of support of this energy efficiency program. Well, Dear friends, continuing this aspect of these associations of privatized apartments, let me say that the figures have already been mentioned. There were 400 million hryvnias allocated. Essentially, it's the same figure that was in this year's annual budget for the year 2017. The issues we want to address with better funding are the same. It's the commercial accounting of the energy efficiency and energy preservation and saving efforts, and all the other aspects that have already been mentioned by my colleagues, like buildings, energy efficiency of the buildings, and so on and so forth. We cannot yet say that the overall amount of 800 million hryvnias, 400 of them for these energy efficiency of the buildings. We, some people, some of our citizens think that, oh, 800 million hryvnias, it's a lot. But we, and I'm sure you, being aware of the commercial prices of all these renovation and all these works costs, you can imagine that with around 6 million buildings in Ukraine, if only 800 million hryvnias is allocated annually, most probably even our grandchildren will not see the energy efficient buildings all over the country. These efforts will take dozens of years, if not hundreds of years. We have very good examples, like, for example, in the Czech Republic, they have the Energy Efficiency Fund that has been operating since 2007. For 5 years, their government was allocating approximately 200 million euros in that fund. They have not yet modernized all of their residential housing, but still, for the country that is 4 times smaller by the number of residents than Ukraine, they have achieved significant results. What are the assessments, overall assessments for Ukraine? According to our German colleagues' assessments that was done 4 years ago, but the situation has not changed significantly. In their calculations for the modernization of residential housing in Ukraine, we need 440 billion hryvnias a year for 20 years. 140 billion. We are now talking about the allocation in the annual budget of less than 1 billion. We certainly understand that the budget, national budget, cannot cover all the needs for energy efficiency programs and efforts. There should certainly be some other mechanisms involving the private sector, but let us bear in mind that the amounts of money and the scale of the support of these efforts is really very, very significant. And if the government increases its efforts, it's going to be it will be a good signal for the private sector as well, that the government is serious about energy efficiency. What else I would like to bring to your attention? We need to study the international experience, and analyzing it, we can highlight 3 areas. First of all, the uninterrupted continual funding of the energy efficiency efforts and programs. Then the private sector, all the actors will understand that the government is serious about it, that there will be a real money put into this program, and that they could participate in it. Second aspect is what we call the complex modernization. It's like not just some single actions, one-time actions like replacing the window glazing or things like that. And the third, it should be the holistic approach, so to say. And the third one is the accounting for the results achieved. So what has been achieved in terms of the energy efficiency implementation. So these three aspects, the uninterrupted funding, the accounting for the results, and the funds themselves. As of yet, I'm not sure I can say that we have all those three components in place.
Thank you very much for the invitation. So my name is Johannes Baur from the EU delegation here in Kiev. The EU is indeed very much supporting all energy efficiency efforts in Ukraine, in particular also the establishment of this energy efficiency fund. For two reasons. One, it is part, as already said, of the obligations of Ukraine under the association agreement. This is one way to implement the energy, to implement a part of the energy efficiency directive. And secondly, because we are convinced that indeed the modernization of multi-story buildings in Ukraine can bring significant positive effects for energy efficiency, energy savings, but also for the living comfort of the entire population, or a big part of the Ukrainian population, and also will have a positive impact on the local economy. Therefore, we are supporting and have been supporting this establishment of the fund. We will provide also significant support funding, both in terms of technical assistance, but also to the activities of the fund. For that reason, we will establish, together with our German partners, a multi-donor trust fund. And we will put, in the first year, 30 million euro into that fund, and the German side, 10 million euro, which will be, I think, a large part of the initial funding of the fund activities in the first year. Indeed, it is clear that we expect also a Ukrainian contribution. We expect that the fund has to be established by the end of the year in order to receive also the 100 million hryvnia that have been attributed in the 2017 budget, and we expect a significant increase also in the 2018 budget as Ukrainian contribution, and it will be even more important to have a really substantial Ukrainian contribution in the years to come, when the donors' money will be used, hopefully, as quickly as possible. So I think that is a very important point. As to the advantages of the actions, I think the main points have already been raised by the previous speakers. The Energy Efficiency Fund will address the thermal modernization of multi-story buildings in particular, and it will do that in a comprehensive way, and it will do that, for example, also by going first through energy audits to identify really the needs and what should be done in order to achieve maximum energy savings, and this approach is also really also a difference to the previous activities. We will, or the fund will work very closely, of course, with homeowners associations, with OSBBs. Energy efficiency is always a local action, and therefore also the cooperation of local NGOs, of local media, of local homeowners association will be really crucial in order to to be successful. That is something which will be very important, also from the local side to watch, and it will also be important to see how the fund will be really working on the spot, how the actions will be done. There, of course, as we know in Ukraine, a number of risks in terms of intransparent operations. So it is essential that the fund operations will be done in that way. We will try also to do our support that this is being done. There will be one donor representative in the supervisory board of the fund, and we will also ask the manager of our multi-donor trust fund, which is the International Finance Corporation, to verify on the spot whether the actions really have been implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your valuable contribution, Mr. Baur. Я також хотів би подякувати всім спікерам. Я думаю, що
I would also like to thank you, Mr. Baur, and I'm sure that our presentations, our brief addresses have built up upon each other and only reinforced the messages we wanted to express. So I'm sure that both our audience here and those who watch us online, they will be convinced in the need to continue and to enhance those efforts in the field of energy efficiency. Although, as we have already said, the government frequently mentions these efforts as a priority, we think that our efforts, especially as far as funding, provision of funding is concerned, should also be made more active, and we would like to call on the representatives of the Budget Committee of the Parliament, of the Verkhovna Rada, and all the public to pay more attention to the issues of energy efficiency in the annual budget, the draft of which is now under discussion in the Parliament. I know that 2 days or 3 days ago there was another governmental statement that they understood the intention and the necessity to increase the funding for the energy efficiency programs, and we think, for example, that that funding should be made at least equal to the subsidies that the government disburses to the local communities. That will make it much more effective. Maybe you have questions, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chubik, Olaf Chubik from Strategy 21 NGO. My question to you, colleagues, is that while analyzing the potential of the energy efficiency programs, have you taken into account the already existing funding mechanisms, especially in the context of the recent governmental efforts of decentralization, including the fiscal decentralization? We, for example, recently met with the representatives of the energy managing bodies of the local government in our area, and we were told that there was, they quoted, they referred us to the program 70-30 in Kiev region, that in their view was very efficient. So my question to you is, do you have any lobbying mechanism, so to say, to get more funding from local budgets, especially for that initial period of when the fund is launched? Because this approach usually is justifiable.
And member states. I mean, if you will provide this part of financial resources to the fund, it is it means like a grant, or it's some kind of investment. Thank you.
Я відповім на перше.
Let me answer the first question. My colleagues and I had earlier this week a meeting, or rather a series of meetings in Lvov, and we certainly think that local programs, they are of utmost importance. For example, the so-called warm loans, heating, so to say, loans, their idea was established, emerged, so to say, at a local level. And in Lvov, we were told specifically that they were among those who initiated that 10 years ago. In Lutsk, we were told that it was around, it's been in place for the last 8 years. So you understand that the government funds a part of a loan that a private person, a private citizen can take for energy efficiency needs. So nowadays there is about a dozen local programs of regional or local levels in Ukraine. But again, these remain mostly local initiatives. I am of the view that there should be some synergy, because with interest rates that the commercial banks now have, these are rare instances when the government or local authorities agree to co-finance these programs. So the the programs of larger scale, they need better financial conditions. If we look at the different regions of Ukraine, it's Volyn, Lviv, Kiev recently have become the leaders because of that synergy with the banking sector, local banks, and the willingness of the local governments and their financial capacity, so to say. But in the other places, it's still far from, far from ideal. But in the regions where these programs have been introduced, they have been successful for the last years. What could be the other programs of co-financing? It's either the co-financing, as I have already mentioned, covering either the interest rate or some part of the credit. It could also be some direct financial participation in some in some areas, as we have already mentioned. There have been 50 to 50 co-financing by the local authorities. And in some cases, that's why the program was called 70 to 30. It reached the level of 70 to 30 joint financing. For example, that was used for the program of the new meters, installation of new meters. These were used, for example, for the apartments where the least well-to-do, the least well-off people live. Let me also add a couple of words. Our NGO, jointly with a number of other NGOs from the other parts of Ukraine, around 30 organizations, not only from Kiev, but also from all the regions of Ukraine. We issued a statement demanding better financing, better funding from the national budget and local budgets too. We all understand that at the local level, it's the picture is much clearer and the needs are known much better. So speaking about those lobbying capacities, we certainly try to work here in Kiev, but let us not leave out local authorities. Some other organizations can work and should work with them. The picture is really very varied. Some of the local authorities do not even disperse 1%. In some areas it's up to 5%. So there is a lot of space for progress.
Grant money, so it is the fund will not give loans itself. It will the entire operation of the energy efficiency fund, including the international, so German and EU contribution, is then a grant element in order to reduce the costs for the final beneficiary, which are the homeowners associations. So assuming the modernization of a building will cost 100,000 euro, the fund will give through local banks who finance the entire operation will give a grant of, for example, 50%, which can be topped up by local grants, and thus reducing the overall costs of the operation to a significant amount.
Добрий день. Як представнику секретаріату Кабінету міністрів також дозвольте одне.
May I ask one brief question? I would like to thank today's speakers for their attention to this reform of energy efficiency efforts in Ukraine, and let me thank also our European partners for their assistance and their participation in the buttressing of our funding efforts for the energy efficiency programs. We, in a lot of reports from the local governments, the gentleman said that, if I heard him correctly, that he represented the Secretariat of the Cabinet of Ministers. So they are receiving the reports in which the local authorities inform them that they are forming the draft documents for the establishment of this fund, and these documents are going to be very soon presented to the Cabinet of Ministers, and also that international experts, certainly local experts, are being involved now in this process. My question is, what's your assessment? Do you think that this process of launching this specialized fund is transparent enough? Well, I personally am a member of 3 working groups at the Cabinet of Ministers, in which the drafts, the bills, so to say, are developed, or the drafts for the documents that are going to cover all the areas of energy efficiency are being developed. For example, recently there was a meeting on the energy efficiency of the multi-storied buildings, but I have not personally assisted at any other meetings. I know that there are some other organizations like RSTI and the other entities that are developing their drafts and are going to present them to the Cabinet of Ministers. But judging from the information that we can see on the website, for example, of the Ministry for Regional Development, in terms of other documents, like, for example, the regulation for the supervisory board and so on, I have not seen any other documents. I've heard that they are under development, but they are not yet on the website. And we can only say that the document is becoming public when it is published. Otherwise, we can suspect all sorts of things. So only when these documents are published, and there is an official statement by the government that the documents are ready and published, and are presented, are submitted to the Cabinet of Ministers consideration. Formally, only then can we say that this is a transparent process. And otherwise, it becomes that old story of the former times when people were reporting of the progress of their work, but the work was not done. So they were running, so to say, ahead of the cart. And in my view, we need to get information, for example, as a participant of the working group. But sometimes we were we were trying to get the requests, our queries to the government. The government was oftentimes responding to us that they, by law, they were not obliged to supply us with the information on the development of the documents, because the documents are only being developed. So they did not need to report to us at which stage was that program. Although I personally think that there wouldn't be a big sin if we get this information from the government, who is doing what, at which stage is the development of this or the other document. And, for example, the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Finance, they opposed the energy service contracts as such. And so the documents in this area have not been adopted by the Cabinet of Ministers. And then these documents were channeled through the Parliament rather than the Cabinet of Ministers. I understand that we certainly cannot avoid the Ministry of Finance, their analysis of the efficiency of money spent by the government from the national budget. But still, I think we can make better programs in this area of energy efficiency, and I can just not tell you why it is not available for the public yet. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your questions.
Are the donors aware of the peculiarities of Ukrainian laws and regulations that state that when the building is transferred from the balance of the city, which is usually the current owner of the building, into the ownership of the newly created Owners Association, the OSBB, that they're supposed to be the kind of final repairs done to the building before it's transferred? Right now, we hear from our members in the banking system that cities are sitting quite often on a lot of funds that they got because of the deregulation, because they're now collecting taxes and keeping them locally. So when you do this fund, do you see that there may be an issue where the cities kind of say, well, it's now up to the Owners Association to do the repairs to the building, which means replacing the major systems, and they will keep the money that they, by law, are supposed to spend on the building before they transfer it, and then your fund will thus be having a lesser effect if the city first repairs the building, then transfers it, and then you guys do whatever you do with the fund's money. I hope that's not too going into details in the regulatory thing, but that's Ukraine. Thanks.
I personally was not aware of this particular issue, but I think we will, of course, face when starting the operations, we will face a number of challenges. That is clear. That is also the experience we have made in many European countries. In the EU, that have established such a fund, and it will take a little bit of time to get fully into speed for this quite complex operations also. But I think that Of course, with the decentralization, some more money has been given to some communities, but overall, of course, this is far not enough in order to cover all the necessary investment needs. And I think from a city perspective, of course, the investments into the main water and also partially district heating infrastructure is much more important, because these systems currently, at least in some cities I've been to, also are risk to collapse, and that would be really a very bad development. So there's so much investment to be done in the Ukrainian cities that I think there will be enough room for the Energy Efficiency Fund to do some useful work.
Я думаю, що таке запитання, як щойно прозвучало, дуже показове, оскільки всіх цікавлять деталі, а ми залишаємося на етапі нерозкриття проєктів.
So our conclusion is that we are all interested in details, but we still remain unaware of how these documents are progressing in the government and the other entities that develop the drafts of these documents. So thank you, all the participants. Thank you, Mr. Baur, for your joining us today, for your support to our messages. Let us follow the situation, and let us hope that whatever has been said by all of us today will be heard by those, by the powers that be. Thank you.